Sarah Beth Goncarova is a writer, screenwriter, visual artist, musician, and animator. But most importantly, she is an auntie of three adorbous kids who were the inspiration for this book and many others. They call her Abba. She lives in a magical house in Montreal with an exceedingly handsome yet perpetually grumpy Tessudo's cat, Caruso. She loves to play musical instruments made from stuff from around the house. Caruso, on the other hand, detests when Abba plays musical instruments made from stuff from around the house, not just because she can never keep them in tune and it sounds frankly horrible, but also because this clearly disrupts her cat's naps. And on today's episode of Auto Interview, it's my utmost pleasure and joy to have on the show today Sarah Beth Goncarova. How are you doing, Sarah?
Well, thank you, Peter. I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, it's my pleasure
Real
to have
pleasure.
you on the show today. I'm
Yeah,
very excited too.
yeah.
So, Sarah, could you tell us about your book, The Adventures of Abba series? And I know that there's quite a lot of other books in the series from the book one to the book two to the book three. Now, I'd love to ask you, how does this book come about? What inspired you to write The Adventure with Abba series?
So I have two nieces and a nephew, and during COVID, we were stuck on either sides of a border,
Mm,
so we couldn't see each other. But they are the love of my life, and so we did Zoom chats quite often, and many times those Zoom chats, I pulled out instruments and started played music for them. We started singing, telling stories, and those stories became uh, more wild and adventurous and a lot of fun. And so the first book that I wrote was a collection of those stories kind of assembled and put together. And that was The Curious Case of the Creepy Cave. That was the first book that I wrote. Um, and it's 8 chapters, but
mm,
I knew it was like a little bit long for them
wow,
because they were 6 and 4 and 2 at the time, and a chapter book might be a little bit too challenging. So I
mm,
did create read alouds, um, with all the funny voices and music and sound effects that kids love, and they loved it. They loved it.
wow,
They they would they had their favorite chapters, they had their favorite jokes that they would play over and over again, and then they would act them out, and the vocabulary was skyrocketing. It was really
wow,
impressive, actually, just in a few weeks to see how this one book really had an effect
wow,
um, on their lives. And so I kept on going with it. I mean, we had more stories to tell, obviously. Um,
mm,
and so the other books in the series, I was trying to match where the oldest was in her reading level. But I think I also, I mean, there's 3 kids, so
yeah,
I wanted to make books that were accessible to the younger child who's now 6 and then 4.
mm,
Um, so I created books for the younger set as well, and an animation that follows the book word for word. So kids can read it, they can hear the words,
mm,
they know what's going on, and then they can read it by themselves if they want, because they've already heard it before. And it works well. It really does. Even with the youngest, uh,
mm,
they're engaged, and they will watch it over and over again, or they'll read it over and over again, or they'll read it out loud, play it. They'll do play acting. It's quite extraordinary. Yeah. And I'm happy to do it. And this has sort of started me off. I think this is a bit of a mission for me,
mm,
to create these read aloud videos and make things
wow,
accessible for even reluctant readers and emerging readers, so that can help
yeah.
kids.
Yeah, that
Uh,
sounds pretty much amazing. And I love the sound of it. I love the start to the making of the series, which sounds very intriguing. So thank you so much for sharing. To see that you have another book titled A Nursing Light. And I particularly love that title so much because it sounded a bit compelling to me. Now, in case of readers who haven't read the book yet, and of course, without giving much information away, could we have a sneak of what we'd expect picking up A Nursing Light?
Here's the copy of the book that I
That's
have
very
on
beautiful
hand.
cover, really.
Yeah, here, I'll put it up to the camera.
Beautiful.
This was my morning commute when
Oh,
I was living in Vietnam. This was about like 7 a.m. These were
oh,
the rice fields that had been flooded by
wow,
the rain. I think this was about, I want to say February, before the the stalks of rice started coming up, but it kind of fit the the title kind of
the
perfectly
title,
because it does
absolutely.
feel like
Yeah.
the light is being harnessed by the land. This book I wrote, it's a I wrote over a number of years. They stem from letter poems that I
Mm,
wrote to my now late husband, and these were my poems to him, my letters to him, and he was um, he's a celebrated poet himself, and
wow,
he was the person in my life who made me believe that I could write. Like before then, I had
wow.
no confidence at all. I didn't think I could at all. I mean, I have aphasia. I stumble over my words constantly.
Oh,
It takes me a lot of drafts to come up with something that I really like.
mm,
Um, and it was through these letters that I really gained confidence.
mm.
Um, and I this past 2 months ago, so it's a bit
Oh,
hard
wow,
to talk about.
wow.
But yeah, I he was a spoken word poet, and he encouraged me to go that route as well. And I ended up recording a lot of, I think everything I recorded in that book, I recorded it um, into a Yeti mic, which is like one of those ASMR mics. And
Mm,
I, it was actually became a great tool for me
wow,
because if the words weren't like rolling off the tongue and sounding musical,
mm,
lyrical, like just kind of smooth, then I would change it.
wow,
So the recording and listening with a headset like this was like probably I would say the most important tool that I found um, for me as a writer, and it really helped me a lot um, to refine, polish. Uh, so I and that kind of got me into recording in general, and
wow,
that was how I was able to do those read alouds for the kids. Actually,
wow.
funny
Wow,
how
yeah,
one thing leads into another like that.
absolutely. And that's so
Yeah,
hard to know, and it's quite emotional to hear you talk about it. I'm sorry about the loss.
he was beloved by the world. He really was. He
Wow,
really was. He was. It
yeah,
was 19-month long
wow,
uh,
wow.
illness. But yeah.
Yeah, that's
And I
quite
wish I
deep.
had written more. I was so during that time period, I was so entrenched, I would say obsessed with
Mm,
keeping him as healthy as possible that
wow,
I couldn't I had no capacity for writing anything during that
mm,
whole time.
wow,
Nothing. Um, and it's funny, like when you stop using some part of your brain, like it starts to atrophy, right, very
mm,
quickly. But on the other hand, if you start practicing every day, you can build it back.
yeah,
Um, so it really is. It's a muscle, right? It's a muscle
yeah,
that
it
we use.
is. Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
I agree
yeah.
with you. I agree with you. Now, Sarah,
Yeah,
let's talk about criticism. As authors, we all have different ways of reacting to feedbacks and criticism of our works. I'm curious to know your opinion about criticism. How do you react to negative reviews of your books, if you ever had one in time past?
I haven't had a negative criticism yet because I guess I just, from the sheer amount that I polish and the amount of effort that I put into it, I think people recognize that
Hmm.
um, kind of right away. Um, but when I'm in the process, I find I take my ego out of it. Like as an artist, as a writer, I believe that it's a practice that we're doing.
Yeah,
Um, it's like a meditation,
absolutely.
and we are really vessels of something greater.
Yeah.
And so I think any criticism, you have to know where they're coming from. For one, don't take it personally. Like really, kind of try to see the
Mm.
constructive aspect of what they're trying to say. Like if if a child were to say to me after reading the books, like, this is great, but I would definitely, I mean, that the whatever he suggests,
Yeah.
I will go with it. Like, yes, absolutely. Like, if that's what you want, yes.
Yeah.
No, if as long as it gets you reading it, um, I don't take that kind of I don't take that personally at all.
Wow, that's
I'm
quite
able to
amazing.
differentiate myself and my work enough that
Yeah.
it's not really something that I let bother me. It's more
Yeah.
like a learning tool. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, and if it's kind of like really off base, then it kind of offers an opportunity for, maybe you can read between the lines and see why they've said what they said, or maybe it's
Mm.
more more about them. Like you never know
Yeah.
where people are coming from. Like
Yeah.
unless you've been in their shoes, which I mean, it's not possible. I mean, you don't.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
Yeah,
I love your take.
it's a tool. It's a
Yeah.
tool.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
love your take on criticism, especially you mentioning that you should know where it's coming from. I think that's very
it's
important to know
important. It's
where it's
important.
coming from.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So thank you so much for
I think
sharing.
if people have taken the time and effort to read through and carefully
Yeah.
and try to understand, that in of itself uh, is pretty great.
Thank you so much for sharing. I found your answer to that question were quite educative, so thank you. Now, Sarah, I've always been fascinated about how authors, especially novelists like yourself, craft long sentences and brings words together in a way that it eventually makes a great novel. These always leave me thinking about how exactly they got their ideas and inspiration. Now, as far as writing is concerned, I too would love to ask you, how do you get your inspiration and ideas? Where did they come from?
Yes, where do they come from? Where do ideas come from? Uh, from life, really, from life. I try to be as authentic as possible,
Mm,
and in everything that I do. Um, Sometimes that kind of takes away opportunities as well, because I'm not like allowing myself that route of jumping into something super imaginative from other people's views. But it's not quite
mm,
that. It's more like, um, I think if you pare down to the most raw, the most authentic, you're most vulnerable,
mm,
which is, I mean, you're putting your heart on your sleeve. and
Yeah.
it's very, to do that is it's a huge act of courage, actually,
Absolutely.
to write that down and put that out into the world.
Yeah.
But that can be, you never know you're gonna whose lives you're gonna touch
Yeah.
with even just that one sentence or one fragment
Absolutely.
of sentence. Like, you never
Yeah.
know, just by that act of like paring everything down and getting and distilling it to the
Mm.
essence, you might just be able to get to touch somebody else in some point in their lives. They might,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a magic to that. There's a magic to that.
Absolutely.
I think writing poetry, uh, in particular, lyrics for songs, like, they have that capability of cutting through time
Yeah.
and space, and they can, something that you might remember from, you were 13 years old, and now you've gone through some horrible thing in your life, and you're like, oh, okay, here we go. That's what they meant.
Mm.
And it helps. So I guess,
Yeah.
roundabout way uh
Yeah. I love
answering the question, but
Yeah, I really do love your answer to that. And knowing particularly that you got your ideas and inspiration from, life experiences. And like you mentioned, writing from the place of life experiences, it's a courageous thing to do. And it's
I
always
think
come in
so.
an heavy, emotional, strong, pulling, compelling form that readers will be like, wow, that's quite heavy. And you never can tell, like you mentioned, so many lives you might, inspire, you might speak
You
through
never
to
know.
that particular word, to that particular paragraph, or to that particular
Mhm.
sentence and page. So, yeah, I so much agree with you. And I love the fact that you
Mhm.
mentioned poetry too, because as a poet, I can relate to all that you said.
I think poetry, and even, it has just the special place. It's able to
Yeah,
do that. Just it's
absolutely.
like a beacon of
Yeah,
light for people in the darkest times. It has
absolutely.
that capability, and we should aspire as writers to create something that poignant, that beautiful,
Mm,
that remarkable. Uh, we should. It's kind of, it's a mission that,
yeah, yeah.
if you choose to take take it on, it's
Yeah,
a valuable one.
yeah, I love your take on this really. So thank you so much for sharing. Now, Sarah, apart from the adventure with Abba book series and the nursing light, do you have any other works you've authored or maybe currently working on?
I do. I ghost wrote a number of years ago. I ghost wrote a book called Sonia's Song. I was helping an author. She lived through the Holocaust in Belgium. She was from
Wow,
Poland. Oh no, German, of Polish descent, and was hiding in plain sight in Belgium. She and her
wow,
brother, and some parts of that book. Well, it was a translation of, what I read was a French translation of the German.
mm,
So translation of a translation, like, it wasn't. It needed help, um, and so I kind of had to rewrite so much of it,
wow,
um, and a lot of parts of it, she had to leave out because they were so painful, and
mm,
so I had to kind of step in, um, and help piece together the story, my own research, um, and just reading. I think I spent, a month per chapter just researching
wow,
and getting those. I mean,
mm,
it was very difficult,
yeah, too,
emotionally tolling, I would say.
absolutely,
And that book, I would say, I mean, I'm listed as an editor on that book, but it's it's definitely, one that I'm proud of. That's my baby.
wow,
Um, and then I have another book that I wrote, even I think it was before that. it was before or after. It was just based, it was called A Year-Long Summer. It was based on my paintings at the time. I'm also a visual artist, and I have been practicing since I was about 13 or so, like just starting to
Oh,
paint. And then I went to art school,
wow.
and I do a lot of sculpture and painting as well. And it's just, I was so prolific that I was like, let's put this into, let's, wouldn't it be interesting to just have a little bit of writing paired with every
Mm,
single painting, and just
yeah,
try to step back a little bit and kind of see where these paintings are coming from, where they're going. It
yeah,
was interesting. It was also it was pretty hard to do. Like
yeah,
when you're creating artwork, um, music, sculpture, painting, all of that, like it's to have to write about it. It's another level of
I
skill that
can
I
tell, yeah.
won't profess to say that I have at all, because I don't. I don't. I like writing these adventures for kids and making them laugh, and
Mm,
um I love writing these letter poems, and I love performing them.
wow.
Um oh, it's all a journey, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I did. I don't know if we were live at that point when I was talking about my up. I have a book that I put together with my now late husband, um, and it's called Encounter, and it was basically his and my letters back and forth to each other. Um, and he was a quite a great poet.
Wow.
Um, of his work, I also helped a lot. I still have some of the books and albums that I worked on with him. This is
Wow.
a children's book that I worked on.
A child
Uh,
sees writer winter coming and a being
yeah,
dreams. Beautiful and
yeah,
fairy.
it's quite quite a stunning book, I should say.
Wow. Nice painting.
it I mean, I worked on this with him, but I can't, it was all his writing. I just made it into being. Like, he gave me a manuscript and I just created the book from it.
That's
um
amazing.
I made these albums.
Wow.
This is, like, gave me the recordings and the manuscript, and I just created, from that I
Wow.
was able to create the albums. And that's, I can reach into my um my art background, and it's kind of what I do is I I like to
That's
help
God
authors.
preserve.
This is Dark Sky Preserve. It's actually really stunning, and I will send you the
Hmm.
links to the Bandcamp things. But
Wow.
I'm able to help authors, if can turn their manuscript into a book, into this precious object.
Wow.
So I'm able to help out with that, and I'm getting better and better. Everything that I do becoming, yeah, my skills are improving,
Yeah.
even though I've done it for a while.
Yeah. I so much love your answers to this question, really. And I love the fact that, you've got quite a lot of work ongoing. So that sounds very amazing. So I would love to
Yeah,
say that's an
Encounter
amazing
will
work you're
be
doing. Yeah.
something pretty incredible, I think.
Now, I'm also
Yeah.
curious to know if you experienced any challenges while writing your book. If there is any, could you share with us what challenge it is and how you ultimately overcame it? Also, are there any challenges that you've encountered ever since it got published?
So, challenges. I have aphasia, so that means, like, I just blank on words quite often
Oh,
in speaking. I probably stumbled over my words like a dozen times in this interview. um, and often when I'm writing, like, just getting over that blank page
oh,
syndrome. it's even more of a challenge because like the words just do not come, and
Oh,
it's hard. I think my strength is really in polishing. Um, uh, just because I can hear the musicality of the language at that point and really start polishing, but just the starting part is it's hard. It's also a leap of faith to um, to sit down and write something that you think that anybody would ever in their right mind would ever want to read. And
mm,
so like that kind of it's this crippling kind of self doubt, self lack of faith, maybe
yeah,
self criticism.
yeah.
Uh,
Self-esteem.
to get past that, I mean, it takes like it's like you have to kind of feel like you're on a bit of a mission. I think for me, um, so that seems to help the challenge of getting through the first parts of writing. Since so because I do kind of out there work, like letter poems is not really a form that many people might know of, but
Yeah.
um, things that kind of blend genres a bit, blend mediums a bit. Since I am kind of a person that does that, I'm blending performance, music, art, letter writing, poetry, fiction, like all of this. I don't really fit into, a cubby hole very easily.
Mm,
So that is a challenge. Um,
yeah.
kind of, it's not really, I'm not really able to um, talk about everything that I'm like distill everything down and
Yeah.
pitch it to somebody. Like
Yeah.
that's a huge challenge. Like developing an elevator pitch or whatever you have to do. Like, oh my God. I'm 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 much more conversational, like just one on one, rather than just like throwing something at somebody. And
Wow.
and I much prefer conversations.
Wow.
So that's a bit of a challenge because you kind of have to be that person. I mean, you
Mm,
as a writer, you have to kind of market your own work,
yeah.
as you go, and you know, um, so that's a huge challenge for me.
Yeah.
Since publishing my work, um, it's still a struggle. It's still a struggle
Yeah.
finding audiences for one. Um, it's the marketing aspect is you have to be almost as creative as you are with the
Absolutely.
writing part.
Yeah.
Um, and the more I grow, the more I learn, and things are constantly changing all the
Absolutely.
time,
Yeah.
constantly. Things are getting easier, things are getting harder, like in some ways, like um, it's yeah, I would say the marketing is probably the most challenging
Yeah.
aspect for me right now. Um, but and I think for many authors as well. I mean, it's
Absolutely.
like a lot of times you just don't know where to start.
Yeah.
Um, unless you've been picked up by a huge publisher with a huge marketing budget,
Yeah.
you're often kind of left on your own.
Yeah.
Or maybe you hire a small team, but if you don't have that budget, like you're on your own, and it's like you're
Yeah.
really up to your own ingenuity. That's definitely a challenge for sure.
Yeah.
But if you
Wow.
could remember about like that, you never know when your story might touch somebody's heart. Like if you can remember that, that
Absolutely.
can keep you going. That can keep you going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I so much love your answers to these questions, really. It sounds very educative to me. So thank you so much for sharing. Now,
Very sweet of
Sarah,
you.
I'd also love to ask you, is there anything that you would love to share with the viewers about your books that we did not mention in this interview and I'd love the viewers to know? Also, as a published author, what sort of advice do you have for other writers who are still struggling with publishing a book? What would you advise people in this category? So I've got two questions in that one.
Yeah, so for the first part first. So for me, the performance aspect is very important in my books.
Mm,
It's important that I'm able to perform. I'm able to pull it off, like just on camera. You know, I haven't quite gotten there to the point that I'm performing my books with all the voices and things because I have to kind of pitch shift my voices up.
yeah.
Um, Live yet, I'm still working on creating like a live kind of show. Um, but I have been able to animate um, my book Super Sleuth,
Mm,
and it was my first real attempt at animating.
wow.
Um, and it took me, I think it was 9 weeks. It was, but
Wow.
it probably could have pared it down to 6 weeks if I had,
Wow.
if I hadn't made kind of egregious mistakes and had to go back and redo. Um,
Wow.
um, but those animations, they brought the story to life in ways
Mm,
that I didn't hadn't thought of before. I
expected.
was able to visualize the characters, hear with their
Mm,
voices,
yeah.
and kind of tweak the humor even more.
Wow.
And find it almost became like another kind of learning tool, actually,
Mm,
um, because I mean, I guess I had a teacher in school who said when you change mediums, you learn something new.
yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
so um, yeah, if you're reading your work out loud, then that will teach you something that you hadn't previously known.
Yeah.
If you're putting music to it, then that might lead you somewhere where you didn't know you would even go before.
Yeah.
um I mean, there's kind of endless possibilities. um so let's see, advice to
Writers.
writers who are still struggling with getting published. um I would say that these days, um being self-published is becoming more and more accepted.
Yeah.
Um, and so I would not be afraid of going down that route. Like even maybe 15 years ago, like it was like, you know, um, it carries a stigma, but I think, I mean, I still encounter that stigma quite some often.
Mm,
Like I will be reaching out to a reviewer on Instagram who I thought might be a good match, and they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, like I don't, you know," and it's like, "Well, I'm wait a minute." Um, yeah, so there's that stigma attached to being self-published.
mm,
I think as poets, most are creating chapbooks that are technically self-published, and it's really not stigmatized. I mean, in some ways, like you have much more freedom. You make all
yeah.
the choices yourself.
Yeah.
Um, every single choice, that from the design to how it looks, how it feels in your hands.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be afraid of going that route. And so many authors are making a really good go of it these days.
Mm,
Um, so many.
wow.
And I think you options are kind of opening in that way.
Mm,
People are becoming more open to it because it is extremely difficult to
absolutely.
get an agent, get a publisher interested in your work.
Mm.
But I think if you can tap into your strengths as a creative person,
Yeah.
you can really
To
go,
help.
you can create something pretty amazing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much, Sarah. I love your answers to this question. Thank you for
A bit
letting us
meandering.
know. Yeah, thank you for letting us know. And thank you also for the advice. I'm hopeful that viewers, including myself, would love to utilize it. So, Sarah, in case we have some viewers who are currently watching this interview and would like to get a copy of any of your books, on what platform is it available on for purchase?
The children's books are all available on Amazon. I have not made them available as ebooks because I don't know if parents really want kids having, spending more time on screens. I think like having a physical book is
It's better.
probably, a better choice
Yeah.
for that age. So I haven't gone that route. But I've also created like these read aloud, which I guess you could call them video books. So those
Yeah.
are free on YouTube.
Oh,
I have a YouTube channel called Read Aloud with Abba. And so the books, I mean, they're out there for free
wow.
to watch, to listen to read. And if you like them, then by all means, like please support the
Yeah.
author here. And Harnessing Light, I have just as an ebook, and that's a bit of a story for you. I found that the books were being pirated, and which was crazy. So
Mm.
I like canceled like any printing for the printing of those books, and I just have the
Wow.
ones that I have purchased. So if you I do have about maybe 50 copies still.
Wow.
Um, and if anybody would want, I'm happy to send them out into the world. I'm more than
Wow.
happy. Um, I've been giving them out to little free libraries wherever I go. Like it's either it's I want to get them out into the world.
Yeah.
And I can also send you some more links to put up on in the
Yeah.
video underneath if you
Yeah.
want. I'll do that for sure.
Yeah. And I left a
Yeah.
link in the description part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Sarah Beth Goncarova's books directly on Amazon and on other platforms. So thank you so much, Sarah, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. It's
Thank you so
awesome
much,
having this
Peter.
conversation with you.
You're quite an inspiration to me as well. You're I mean, how many interviews have you had with authors? Like in the hundreds.
We've got over
So
400.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
quite astonishing. That's
thank
quite
you.
admirable. So
Thank
I
you so
applaud
much.
you for doing that. Authors, we need allies like you
Mm,
helping to get the word out.
yeah.
And it also it's great. We need more people like you. For sure. Yeah, we
Yeah,
do.
thank you. I so much appreciate your kind words. Appreciate it. Yeah.